Mark Leibovich. He is a guy who was writing a story for the New York Times Magazine for me. He's the editor of the New York Times Magazine, and when they came to me and said, New York Times Magazine wants to write something on you, I said, yeah, stand in line. And I don't think so. And I was told, no, we've researched this guy. And I said, yeah, you researched everybody. And it never works out well. And why would I do an interview with the New York Times? And they gave me a bunch of his stuff to read. And it was on just a myriad of different people. And he always seemed fair. And I don't know, I would blame it on being drunk at the time, but I was totally sober. And I said, all right. And the thing came out, and it was fair. And I liked him. And I liked him because he had natural curiosity. He was not going for the typical things. He was actually trying to understand me and understand my point of view and what we were trying to do. I don't ever see natural curiosity in a reporter. I should say rarely do I see it in a reporter. They come in, they know what they're going to write, what they're going to tell, and then they just find those things, and then it's already written before they ever sit down. Wasn't like that with Mark. So he told me at the time he was writing a book, and this is maybe 3 years ago. I was thinking about writing a book, and he was going to write it on Washington. And I said, when it comes out, let me see it. It's called This Town, Two Parties and a Funeral. Mark is with us now, and I think this is a book that you should read. This is a guy who was told, if I'm not mistaken, you stepped out of line.
Oh, I'm told that every day now.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've given away the secret handshake. I've written about, look, I guess the tenor of the criticism about this book, and I guess it's a tough book, and it's tough on Democrats, and it's tough on Republicans, and it's certainly tough on the media, and it's tough for me because I'm a member of the media, and I live there, and these are people I go to work with. But the tenor of the criticism has been, how dare he? How dare anyone on the inside speak critically of others on the inside? And look, I'm very transparent. I mean, I live there. I live there of my own volition for now. I cover politics. I, for some reason, like politics. And, my family and I have a good life there. But, look, it's a very comfortable town. And it's the last place in America that should be as comfortable as it is. So I wanted to shake things up and name some names. And that's what I did. And it's been a little strange this summer. But mostly, I've been out of town. And the response has been pretty amazing.
I've been talking to several people on the inside, and they say, I can't say anything, Glenn. I can't violate these. I said, did you take an oath? Did you take an oath with? I mean, is there like some sort of skull and crossbones society that you're swearing an allegiance to? Well, no. Well, then, who's your allegiance to? What do you mean?
It's like it is. I mean, that's sort of, in a way, that's sort of how people talk to each other when they're in private, but. Look, Washington, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but Washington feels like a conspiracy that everyone there kind of knows is happening and no one on the outside fully understands except that they pay for it.
Yes.
And that's, there's just a lot beyond the official story of dysfunction.
I asked some of the people in Washington I was with this last week, and I said, how many guys know a collapse is coming? How many do you know? How many of the people in the Senate and the House know that it doesn't work, that it won't continue? And everybody answered the same way. Some believe in unicorns. So some can't explain it, but they believe that, something's going to happen. But in their heart, they also know it's not going to last. All of them. But yet they continue to go on because, as they were telling me this weekend, this isn't a problem with parties as much as it is with just sheer, I want this job.
Yes. You said it better than I could. I mean, it's self-perpetuation. It's like when you get elected to office, when you get your ticket to the political class, you are set for life. You have joined this permanent feudal culture, in the words of Senator Coburn of Oklahoma, of people who are cashing in on this huge incredibly wealthy racket that has grown up in Washington, D.C., the wealthiest.
They're not afraid of being voted out of office because they'll just become a consultant. They'll just go across the street.
What's funny because
they'll make more money.
People are now routinely joking about, Boehner will be making 7 figures, or actually probably $5 million a year if he wants to, at some lobbying firm down the street, if he doesn't keep his speakership. I mean, people talk about this as the end all for John Boehner. I mean, think about it. Every Speaker of the House, every Senate minority leader, House minority leader of the last 20 years or so has stayed in Washington. No one goes home. Okay. Over 50.
So how do we fix this?
That's a great question. You know what I would do? I would say this. I would, if I were sitting in Iowa talking to a presidential candidate or talking to a candidate for House or Senate or something, the first question I would ask them is, what are you going to do if you lose? And how long are you going to stick around? And when you stick around, or after you're done serving, what are you going to do then? You're going to come back? And they'll probably mostly lie and say, oh, yes, I'm going to come back and I'm going to volunteer in the soup kitchen or something like that. But at least you get the notion out there that politics, that public service is in fact public service. I mean, George Washington spent the last part of his life, I think you might have told me this, living in fear that he was going to do something after his presidency that would disgrace himself.
Yeah.
Okay. No one has that anxiety. I mean, yes, you can do a 180 on everything you've promised and then lobby for the exact other side like Richard Gephardt, he's a classic example of this. Does and so many other people do, and there's no punishment. So I would just get the conversation going in the direction not so much of left versus right, but inside versus outside. So
you said, and you were the first person, because I think we have a one-party system, bordering on a two-party system, the Ted Cruz's and the Louis Gohmerts of the world that are kind of on this outside. But you say there's three-party. Explain.
Well, I think the three parties, first of all, I think Washington itself is one big party. I think the big party here, the Uber party here, is what you see in Washington now, the party of the grown-ups, as they say, right? Everyone says, oh, well, the grown-ups will take over now and we'll kick this down the road again.
Hang on, before you finish that, I want to tell you something that I'd like your opinion on, and I think this is kind of what you're saying here, in one sliver of it, is I was at the hotel this last weekend, in Washington, D.C., right across the street from the White House. The IMF is in town, and all of the emerging countries, they were everywhere, and they were working in the lobby and everything else. Up on the 11th floor or something was cocktail hour, and it was all the Americans, and all the Americans are partying and living the high life, and all the emerging countries were actually having meetings. The ones who should be paying attention. We were drinking. We were having a blast.
Have you ever been to the White House Correspondents' Dinner?
Once, and I'll never go again.
Okay, the White House Correspondents. I don't go anymore either. We're not allowed to go, which is I thank my bosses for not allowing me to go. But it is now a 5-day party because the achievements of the Washington establishment are no longer sufficiently celebrated with a single banquet. We need 5 days of pre-parties and after-parties and brunches and
it's crazy.
It's insane.
Have you gone?
I have not gone since 2006.
Okay, I went in 2009, and my wife and I couldn't get out of there fast enough, and we got back, and we looked at each other, and I said, I really feel like I have to take a shower. It was the slimiest room I've ever been in.
It's grotesque.
It is.
But what's interesting is that everyone complains about it, and everyone knows that it's grotesque, and it paints a terrible picture of privilege at a time when the rest of the country is struggling. And presidents speak there. Democrats, Republicans, they speak every year to sanction this. And they just keep going. No one can stop itself. It's like an addiction. It's
started by?
What was it? It started in 34.
No.
Wait, Woodrow Wilson?
Yes.
Was it Woodrow Wilson?
Yes, it was Woodrow.
Wow, I didn't know that. Yeah,
Woodrow.
It started as
Wilson.
Wow. Yeah, I don't want to.
Don't get me started. Okay, so tell me about the three parties.
Well, I think you have a sort of a centrist party, and then you have the sort of far left, and then you have a wing. You call it the Tea Party now, but a wing of the Republican Party that could very, very legitimately. I don't know if it break off formally, but they certainly have.
I think here's what I think is going to happen, and you spend more time there. And I have a lot of friends. I mean, we just had Ann Coulter in yesterday, and she said this would be horrible and this won't happen. And I said, look at Charles Sumner. What happened to the Whig Party? In 1853, Charles Sumner is a guy who's starting a Republican Party. There's only 20 of them. They're the most hated people. Guy comes over across from the House, beats him to death, almost to death in the Senate because he's so hated. 7 years later, Abraham Lincoln is a Republican.
Right.
I mean, it changed overnight. I think with what's happening with Obamacare and the debt ceiling and everything, all these horrible attacks, there's only really a couple of people that are standing up and saying, this is really what I believe. No games, nothing. This is what I believe. I think those guys are going to inspire a whole new generation if they're not eaten by the machine.
Well, first of all, I agree. I mean, first of all, they're not alone. I mean, look at Ted Cruz's poll numbers. I mean, if you look at early presidential polls or something, I mean, Ted Cruz is going to be a serious candidate for president on the strength of what we're talking about here.
Hold on just a second. I just want you to remember. Yeah. This is an editor of the New York Times Magazine saying that. I don't hear that from anybody else in the mainstream media. What you
Cruz
just
is
said.
A serious candidate for president?
Yeah.
No, Cruz. Well, they should say it because it's true. I mean, look at the crowds he drew. I mean, it's a very real energy that if you take any time outside of Washington, you can see.
But they won't say that. They say he's crazy. They say he's crazy. He's dangerous.
But his own party is saying his own. I mean,
I know.
His own party now. I mean, you go.
I don't think it is his party. I think you described this to me once. I think it was on the air. You said that center party is the McCain-Clinton party. That's not a center party. That's just a grotesque party. That's just that power. The people on the uber left, they believe in something. The Clintons, McCains, they just are in for their own power, and it's grotesque.
Well, it's a status quo party,
yes,
right? And why mess with the status quo when, I mean, look, Bill Clinton is making has made $110 million in speaking fees since he left the White House. I mean, that is the kind of racket that is available to public figures now.
When Harry and Bess Truman left the White House, the argument was, let's fly. And he said, no, I want to drive. I haven't driven the new interstate.
Yeah.
And they get into their old car, and he drives, and they drive home. They get about halfway home. He's pulled over on the interstate.
Turnpike or whatever.
You know this story?
No, yes. And he didn't have a pension. He didn't have Secret Service protection.
He had nothing. Yeah. And the cop said, my gosh, Mr. President. And Bess leans over and says, please, would you give him a ticket for driving so slow? But he went back to real life, and then you didn't hear from these guys again. Right. He served, and that was the pinnacle. Now that's not the pinnacle. The White House and all of these jobs, that's just a stepping stone to get you into something even bigger, and it's grotesque.
It is. And Harry Truman, by the way, was not that long ago. I mean, obviously, we're talking, I mean, this was, when did he leave the White House? 52, 53 or something like that? I mean, now look, George Washington returned to the farm, right? And he wanted to stay, but the founders said, no, look, we want you to return to the farm, and that's what we believe in citizen.
No, he didn't want to. He didn't want to be president.
He didn't want to be president much longer. But there was a time when there was a question of how long he should serve in Washington, and they encouraged him. No, you must go become a citizen again. And by the way, Harry Truman, studied this. I mean, he loved Cincinnatus, the citizen leader, and look, that's completely lost. Everyone stays. I mean, 50% of all senators who leave become lobbyists.
So what happens to us? Because I'm looking at the. I'm looking at the debt ceiling, and I've never seen. Have you ever seen a president go on CNBC and say to the markets, you should panic. You should really worry about this. We have the 14th Amendment says we can't default on our debts. Right. I think he's Christopher Walken in The Deer Hunter. I think he'll pull the trigger. Have you ever seen that? What happens to us from here?
I hope it doesn't happen. I don't know. I have no idea. We've never been here before. What happened? I mean, I'm guessing, do you want my prediction of what will happen in the next 24, 48 hours? I think something will intervene. I don't think we will get to that point. But I think, look, Boehner said the same thing. I mean, this is what, I don't know if it's a talking point or what, but they said we cannot let this happen. And that will perpetuate whatever happens.
How disconnected What do Americans need to know that you just don't think they really understand?
The full extent of the culture that we're talking about. People have an intuitive sense that, Washington, it's a swamp. Because people, when they run for office, they say, I'm going to drain the swamp. And then they become an alligator. They settle in like a warm whirlpool bath. Right?
Yeah.
They just become part
of it.
Club. People, what I hope that this book does is allows people to hate Washington with a greater degree of detail and specificity. And frankly, maybe this is me hoping beyond hope, introducing a piece of shame into the system. Because I don't think there's any
shame. Two people: shame a Republican and shame a Democrat.
Shame people who are just in.
No. Shame them from the book. Tell me one thing that you say in the book that is shameful. That you're shaming a Republican and you're shaming a Democrat.
Richard Gephardt, basically reverses everything he ever believed and fought for as a presidential candidate, as a House majority leader, and basically is now making $8 million a year as a lobbyist, fighting for precisely the opposite things that he fought for. Trent Lott, his counterpart in the Senate majority leader and the Senate minority leader for many years. I remember sitting in his office. He's a very, very established Republican. He was telling me, he has his lobbying office on K Street. He was saying, I hate Washington. Boy, I hate Washington. All I want to do is go back to Mississippi. And I was like, Senator, you can do this. Why do you stay in Washington? Why are you here? And he looked at me like I was crazy. He said, because this is where the money is. And again,
my God.
He literally said that. And I have great respect for him being candid. I do think that Republicans tend to be more candid in their willingness to admit to it's okay to be making money. Yeah, I'm selling out, but I'm admitting it too. Democrats are far more willing to say, or far less willing to say that, and they say, I'm a strategic advisor, and I'm continuing to work on issues that I'm passionate about. But no, I could give you a million examples. The book lays it out. Look, the book, I hope, is entertaining. People think that people laugh and people are outraged, which I think is a good combination. Because if you don't laugh, you cry. But it's, just no one leaves, and very, very few people leave better than they come in.
I think there is, I think the name of the book is This Town. I think this is a book that can bring the left and right together and will actually explain to you what's really going on, what the problems are, from a guy who is just letting the chips fall where they may. This Town, 2 parties and a funeral. Mark, it is good to have you here.
Glenn, great to be here.
Thanks
for having me.
You bet.